The 1920s began with a collective sigh of relief. The Great War had scarred a generation. It had redrawn the map of Europe and was finally over. It left behind a world desperate to forget the mud and misery of the trenches. People craved a new beginning, a brighter future. The decade that followed seemed to offer just that. It felt like a truly new age, unprecedented change and boundless optimism. In cities across Britain and America, the air crackled with energy and possibility. Old Victorian certainties were being swept away. Modern life felt fast, loud and exciting. Jazz age, motor car, flapper. A powerful economic boom fueled this explosion of energy. Governments, especially in the US, chose a hands-off approach. Laissez-faire meant fewer rules and less interference. Leaders believed freeing industry would bring prosperity for all. Taxes were cut, especially for corporations and the wealthy. The idea, extra money would be reinvested into new factories, new products. The economic philosophy of the 1920s was simple: get government out of the way of business. This laissez-faire approach was championed by political leaders. They believed the key to national wealth was unleashing private enterprise. They argued regulations stifled innovation. They said taxes drained capital that could be used for investment. Following this logic, they slashed income taxes. They also cut corporate taxes. The intention was to create a virtuous circle. With more money in their pockets, the wealthy would invest in businesses. Businesses would expand. They would hire more workers. They would produce more goods. The result? More jobs and cheaper products for the nation. The policy had a dramatic, immediate effect. Freed from burdens and lighter taxes, industries went on a tear. Production soared. Factories expanded rapidly, churning out steel. They produced chemicals. They made consumer products. To finance expansion, companies turned to banks, eager to lend. The financial system was awash with money. Optimism made credit easy. Banks lowered lending standards, offering loans to large corporations. They lent to small businesses. They lent to individuals eager for a piece of the action. This easy credit fueled the economic engine at full throttle. Nothing symbolizes the industrial might of the 1920s more than the assembly line. Pioneered and perfected by Henry Ford for the production of his Model T car, this method revolutionized manufacturing. Instead of a small team of skilled craftsmen, the assembly line broke the process down into simple, repetitive tasks. Each worker stood in one place, performing a single job as the product moved past them on a conveyor belt. This change dramatically increased speed and efficiency. A car that might have taken days to build could now be assembled in a matter of hours. It wasn't just about making things faster, it was about making them in vast, unprecedented quantities. Mass production led to a steep drop in the cost of manufactured goods. The Ford Model T is the classic example. In the early 1910s, it was a luxury item. By the mid-1920s, its price had fallen so much it became affordable for many middle-class and even some working-class families. Radios, telephones, vacuum cleaners, washing machines began to appear in ordinary homes across the country, fundamentally changing the fabric of daily life. The 1920s witnessed the birth of the modern consumer society. Before this decade, people's economic lives were largely defined by what they produced: farmers, miners, factory workers. The boom years shifted that identity. Increasingly, people were defined by what they consumed. New products were dazzling. Department store windows showed the latest fashions. Gleaming kitchen appliances, stylish furniture, not just utility, comfort, convenience, a sense of status. Shopping became a national pastime. The motor car was the era's ultimate consumer product. It reshaped landscapes and daily life. Ownership meant freedom. Families escaped their neighborhoods. Weekend trips, exploring the country. New businesses served motorists. Petrol stations, roadside diners, motels. The car was more than transport. It symbolized personal liberty, economic success. Inside the home, the radio worked similar magic culturally. prices fell, and radios became standard in living rooms across the nation. The radio was a magic box, bringing the world into the home. Families gathered to listen to music. Comedy shows, news broadcasts, dramatic plays, a shared national culture formed like never before. This consumerism rested on optimism and credit. In the heady atmosphere of the 1920s, the stock market transformed into a national obsession. Newspapers were filled with stories of ordinary people, secretaries, factory workers, shoe shiners, who had made fortunes by playing the market. The relentless upward climb of stock prices created an intoxicating mood of optimism. This wasn't investing, it was a one-way bet on a prosperous future. A dangerous new practice fueled this speculative fever, buying on margin. This was essentially a way to buy stocks with borrowed money. An investor might only put down 10%, 20% of the stock's price in cash. The rest was loaned to them by their stockbroker. This was incredibly appealing because it magnified potential profits. The catch, of course, was that it also magnified losses. If the stock's price fell, the broker could issue a margin call demanding immediate repayment of the loan. If the investor couldn't pay, the broker would sell the stock, often at a huge loss for the client. The 1920s were a decade of movement. For the first time in American history, more people lived in cities than in rural areas. A great migration was underway as millions left farms and small towns drawn by the promise of the metropolis. Mechanization of agriculture meant fewer hands were needed on the land. Cities, booming factories, expanding businesses were magnets for ambition. This was the jazz age, jazz clubs, speakeasies, illegal bars in Prohibition, dance halls. A new generation cast off parents' stiff formalities. They danced the Charleston, they danced the Black Bottom. Central to nightlife was the flapper, an icon of female liberation, short hair, raised hemlines, bold attitude, but beneath the glitter, fundamental weaknesses were growing. Limited regulation, easy credit, both planted the seeds of eventual collapse. The roar of the 20s drowned out warning signs. By the autumn of 1929, the stock market had reached heights that were completely disconnected from economic reality. The relentless optimism that had powered the bull market for years had created a bubble of epic proportions. Industrial production had started to slow down. The construction industry was in a slump. Car sales were declining. On Thursday, the 24th of October, now known as Black Thursday, a wave of selling hit the market. As prices began to fall, the system of margin buying turned toxic. Brokers made margin calls. Most couldn't pay. Brokers were forced to sell their clients' stocks, which pushed prices down even further. On Monday, the 28th of October, the market plunged again. Then came Black Tuesday, the 29th of October, 1929. The opening bell was met with a tidal wave of sell orders. There were simply no buyers. In a single day, the market lost billions of dollars, wiping out the paper fortunes of millions of people. The crash was not a single event, but a process, eventually losing almost 90% of its peak value. The unwavering optimism that had defined the decade was shattered, replaced by a profound sense of fear and uncertainty. Businesses laid off workers. Banks began to fail in droves, taking their depositors' life savings with them. Looking back, the lessons of the 1920s are stark and clear. Rapid growth fueled by debt and speculation can hide enormous risks. The decade showed the dangers of insufficient regulation and how irrational exuberance can create a bubble that must eventually burst. The Roaring Twenties was a remarkable period of innovation and cultural change, but its most enduring legacy is its painful lesson about the relationship between hope, risk, and the unforgiving laws of economic gravity.